we're still not cutting. I think over 40% of New Mexico's budget relates to public education. And we're not hearing any solutions. We aren't even cutting any of the funding, let alone hearing some solutions with regard to education. So I send my 2 daughters to Catholic school, and I would encourage, I'm also active with Educate New Mexico, which allows others to send their children to the school of their choice. And so I believe that parents need to step up, get more involved in their local school boards and communities, and that's how we're going to fix the education system. If you're not reading by the 3rd grade, and your child is not reading by the 3rd grade, your child has a problem. So we got to fix that. You got to, as a parent, say, my child needs to read by the end of the 3rd grade.
I think education is the most important responsibility of society to its children, and we are absolutely failing in that regard. And the reason we are failing in that regard is because as parents and as communities, we have abdicated that responsibility to greater and greater centralized authorities. We see now with the Federal Department of Education, which is in and of itself unconstitutional, we have a bureaucracy that does not run a single school, does not educate a single child, but rather is a bureaucracy in Washington that sucks up money and passes down unfunded mandates. That needs to change. That is something I will fight for as a member of Congress, to return the power that the Federal Department of Education has taken on back to the states, and ultimately back down to the individual parents who have the responsibility and should have the choice and the freedom to decide how their children are educated for themselves. I'm a big supporter of homeschooling. I have a lot of friends that were homeschooled, and I have an incredible respect for the intellectual perspective that they have as a benefit from having gone through that educational process rather than from going through government-run schools. And I think in this debate it's very important that we're careful in the terminology that we use, that we don't talk about public schools versus private schools, but rather free market schools or government-run schools. And the reason that's so important is that the natural state of a human child's mind is to be engaged in learning and assimilating information and putting things together and finding things out for themselves. And when you put them into a classroom where they have to be trained to take tests that are determined by some bureaucrat in Washington, when you have government-run schools that teach children not how to think, but what to think, which is in and of itself a very dangerous proposition, you stifle that process. And we've seen the effect in the way that we are putting kids through an education system today that doesn't serve them and doesn't serve the best interests of our society and does not meet our responsibility to educate our children.
Another question for Adam. What do you think, or how do you feel about a value-added tax?
I'm against it.
Tom?
Ditto.
Okay. This one's for Tom then. What is your position on whether the U.S. should finish building the fence along our southern border?
Well, I don't think the fence is going to do any good, but I'm always one of those people that think if you start something and make a commitment to the American public to do something, that you should finish the job, and you should not make excuses for that. But the fence basically has little passageways for the deer and the elk, to pass through. And the fence isn't going to do the job. But so I do think we need to secure our borders. We need to enforce the laws that we have in this land. I think you're seeing in Arizona with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, when you enforce the law, it has an effect. It has a repercussion there. And so I'd like to see that done here in New Mexico, but we're talking in a sanctuary city right here in New Mexico. So we need a fence, but it needs to be a fence of, let's call it the virtual fence, because it needs to be better than what we've got.
I think securing our borders is one of the most important responsibilities of the federal government, and when we are investing so many security resources around the world in things that don't serve American security, it's important that we invest those resources in ways that actually make us safer here at home. And so I wholeheartedly support whatever we need to do to make our borders secure, and one of the things that I would press for, because I think it is something that our federal government has been grossly negligent on, would be hearings where we would listen to Border Patrol agents and see what they think they need to actually secure our border. And this doesn't have to be the kind of polarizing debate that it has become in this country, where it's pro-immigration, pro-immigrant or anti-immigration and anti-immigrant, because there are legitimate concerns on both of the extremes of this debate that can be met by a policy that addresses all of them. And we have to fundamentally look at the incentive system that we've set up that promotes illegal immigration and a black market for labor here in the United States. The first thing we need to look at is the burdens that we've placed on people who are being employed legally in this country. And when an employer looks at the free market, or they look at what's in front of them, and they see that if I employ someone legally, it's going to cost X that I want to pay someone, plus all of these additional costs of employment that the government has imposed as burdens through taxation, or I can employ someone illegally and not have to pay any of those taxes and not have any accountability. Well, we've created a very destructive incentive system, and the first thing we need to do is remove the stone that we've placed around all of our necks as Americans and level the economic playing field. And that in and of itself would remove the incentive for the economic the black market for labor that we have that promotes the illegal immigration that we have in this country. At the same time, we can create a guest worker program that has immigrants paying more than their share of taxes that Americans are paying associated with employment. They would have them cover the cost of that and go towards securing the border. We can't have an immigration policy that keeps Americans safe, that recognizes the economic reality, and doesn't give people who are here illegally an economic advantage.
Okay, next question again for Adam. There's no question that entitlements, including Medicare and Social Security, are going to eat up larger and larger shares of the federal budget. What will you do to solve this problem?
Well, I think the way Tom addressed it actually in his opening remarks was a very good approach to that, and I would support an approach that looks at that from that perspective. But I think what we need to do in the long term is heed the wisdom of our founders and the constitutional solution and see that the federal government has no authority to conduct programs of this nature. And what I'd like to do, the policy that I would support would be a way to take these programs that would return, once we get them back to a point that the states can handle them, so that we return the authority and the responsibility for all of those welfare programs to the states, where they can be done in a way that is sustainable, if the states so desire, in a way that serves the people of the states and is based on what the will of the people of those states in a way that can best serve the individuals and communities, rather than having a bureaucracy in Washington try to decide how we're going to take care of each other in our communities.
With regard to the entitlement spending on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, for instance, the president and a lot of people talk about waste and inefficiency. That always seems to come up. I think we need to be able to address those issues, and it doesn't have to have a new piece of legislation in order to remove the waste and inefficiency. The problem that we have is we have a third-party payer system, and I'm not in favor of a single-party payer system unless it's the actual person receiving the benefits. The problem that we have is we have a disconnect between the benefits that people are receiving from the cost. For instance, on your pay stub, the government is nice enough to only list half of what the taxes that are being paid on your pay stub. What I would like to see is that the full amount of the taxes that are being paid for Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare are listed on your pay stub, because then people are going to come unglued with how their money is being spent. So I'd like to put that out forward first of all in order to address the cost issue. But the solution is we don't know what anything costs with regard to entitlement spending. And we have to have ownership, individual responsibility with regard to the benefits that you're receiving. People should say, I'm receiving food stamps and I'm not getting it on a little electronic card. You can see what you're receiving. And then there's a balance, there's an account where you can actually see, are you contributing something in taxes to pay for this benefit that you're getting? I mean, we're a compassionate society, we want to help people. Republicans want to help people too. We're not the bad guys. But there does come a limit, and we have to wake up and take the tough medicine of individual responsibility that has been lacking. And for many people, their parents never gave it to them because their grandparents never gave it to the parents in the first place. And so we definitely have got to address the cost on these entitlement programs. I mean, it's ballooning out of control.
Tom, what is your position on the 9/11 truth movement and potential government involvement in 9/11?
don't like that whole concept. I think that we have Muslim terrorists that attack this country. And I read the 9/11 Commission report among the different documents that I've read, and I don't subscribe to that philosophy.
Well, I think that the 9/11 Truth Movement goes and makes some great leaps in connecting dots in which there are no connections. And they have taken a very complicated event and in many ways played on the fears of Americans in a way to excite people, but there is a legitimate purpose for taking a look at what happened that day, because clearly there are people who are responsible who could have prevented those attacks from happening and were never held accountable. And so I think in order to strengthen our national security and address some of the failures of our national security apparatus that day, there is due cause, but most of what you see coming from the 9/11 Truth Movement is groundless.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, we've got 2 questions to go, written, and then hopefully start thinking in your heads, get your hands raised, and after 2 questions, we're going to take some from the audience. So, next question could be potentially really short. So, Adam, establishment of English as our official national language, good or bad idea?
I think in a sense it already is, as all of our founding documents are written in English, but I don't think the government has a mandate or an authority to try to impose what language people are using in a free country.
I would support English as the official language of the United States of America.
Back to you, Tom. Why are you the best choice to carry the GOP banner in November?
Well, the short answer is I think I can win, and it's going to be a really tough race. I think that the difference is you need to have grassroots support in New Mexico, and I've got grassroots support. I mean, I'm a Tea Party person or a Tea Party patriot. You know, you kind of feel like you're saying a bad word if you call yourself a patriot nowadays. But I think that I have the skill set and the resume that people want to see. They want to see someone who's not entitled to the job because of their last name. They want to see somebody who's not tied to the politics of usual and corruption. And there's definitely corruption. Mr. Ben Ray Lujan Jr. was in the Public Regulatory Commission prior to going to the United States Congress. And what do we have in the Public Regulatory Commission but corruption up and down? And so I think that my background, my honesty, my genuine attempt to represent the people of the 3rd Congressional District is going to come through when November 2nd comes along.
Well, I would say what he said and then some, but I'm running because I think I have what it takes to win this seat away from Ben Ray Lujan. And I think we've demonstrated in the course of this campaign that we have the fundraising ability, we have the grassroots support. You can see in the signs that you might have noticed on the way in that are unaffiliated with the campaign, the Coca-Cola parody signs that say "Enjoy Kokesh." I think that's great evidence of the kind of grassroots support that we have here from activists in New Mexico. I'm also a Tea Party patriot. I don't think patriot is a bad word. I've identified myself as a patriot since I joined the Marine Corps, since before that even, and I think that shows in what I've stood up for in speaking out since I got out of the Marine Corps, and in all the ways that I've stood up for what it means to be American in the Constitution. And I think it means something that I have the only consistently constitutional platform of any candidate in this race. And we have demonstrated that this message has the kind of broad appeal that will bring people together. We've already got Democrats and independents who have changed their registration just to support this campaign. I think that's the greatest evidence of the ability of this campaign to win this district and take it back from Ben Ray Lujan and send someone to Washington who can really represent the people of New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District.
Okay, questions from the floor. Gentleman in the blue shirt first.
One of the things that I'm concerned about, and my wife and I were talking, that in each of the races, Republican races, we really have a tough choice between individual candidates, ones where we have more than 3 or 4, it becomes even more pronounced. My question to each of you is that if you were to not get the nod from the party, how would you specifically support, or would you specifically support the winning candidate? And how would you then support that individual? Because the worst thing that we could do is have a split between the two wonderful organizations that each of you guys have. And in doing so, Ben Ray Lujan gets elected.
I would absolutely support Mr. Mullins here as a candidate against Ben Ray Lujan. That's an easy one. I think compared to what we have now, either of us would do a far better job of representing the people here. And I would enthusiastically, personally support Tom Mullins as the candidate if he were to get the nomination, specifically in lending the capabilities that we've developed in our organization already. We have a virtual phone bank that we've put together, which we've already used to support Zenith Kepler here in Santa Fe. The organization that we've put together through our email list, through our online fundraising, through our the national support that we've been able to garner through the internet, being able to lend that to support not just Tom Mullins if he were to be the nominee, but the other Republican candidates in this race. When we see a choice between either Diane Dennis or 5 wonderful Republican gubernatorial candidates who all have an incredible opportunity, and I think that is too much to give up for any personal petty differences when we have such an incredible opportunity here as the party of big tent, smaller government to really turn the state around, and that's something that I'm behind wholeheartedly, regardless of what happens in this race.
Yes, I would support Adam Kokesh and his entire team and their efforts if I would not win the primary. And I'd have to ask them what would be the best way, rather than me imposing my views, kind of like the federal government. They come in and say, we're here to help you, you know. I would visit with Adam and his group and say, what can I do to help? But specifically, we got a problem right here in Santa Fe. We do not have someone to run against Brian Egoff, who's and I've been to several meetings, and I keep asking, well, if you are going to fight the fight and change our country, you have got to find somebody here locally. And when we get down to working together, I mean, that's how we're going to win all the races here. I mean, we're going to win the governor, lieutenant governor combination, the state land commissioner, the congressional seats. We're going to turn New Mexico red is because we're going to get it at every single level, whether it's dog catcher, or the congressional seat. We got to work together on that, and I'll do that.
Before I take the next question, I want to introduce, I failed to introduce Ben Alimo, who is from Santa Fe and a Rio Grande Foundation board member. Are you in Brian Egoff's district by any chance, Ben?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
It's
Okay.
not too late to start
You're going
collecting
up to support the
signatures.
Rio Grande Foundation, that's all we got.
I think you have a few more days to get 36 signatures
Yeah.
on a piece of paper.
You might
Yep.
be too young. So, this gentleman right in the middle, yes, what's your question?
What were your takes on the healthcare summit last week?
Tom first.
It was political theater, is basically what it was. I think everybody knew what the answers were and the positions. It didn't change anything. I did think that the Republicans did well by being able to read the bill. What a concept, read the bill that they're voting on and pointing out certain items. I think the president came off looking rather petty. Unfortunately, not everyone probably watched 7 hours of the discussion on that. So I do think it was a political theater attempt to ram it through, and I think that's what they're going to do.
Well, Tom's right that it was political theater, as pretty much everything on Capitol Hill is political theater, which I have experience in as a lobbyist for veterans' rights and on veterans' issues. And I've seen a lot of that up close, but there was one thing that was not present at that healthcare summit that really bothered me. I can't say I watched the entire 7 hours if that's what it was, but I've read some reports from people who were, and I think this is really important in terms of what we need to put forth as a candidate for the 3rd District to take out Ben Ray Lujan, is that I've often challenged the National Republican Party leadership, and I really think it has gotten quite disconnected from its own base and from the grassroots and from really core American values. And we have to be honest about it, that some of the Republican leadership, they're not even conservatives anymore. And they've become just as corrupt as the Democrats. And I'm proud of the fact that that's something I'm on record saying, that I've spoken out against the national Republican leadership. But the one thing at the healthcare summit that wasn't discussed was the constitutional authority and whether or not the government had any right whatsoever to take over our healthcare system. You didn't hear it from Democrats or Republicans, and in this show of political theater, all you saw was people scoring points, getting out their talking points, and digging in their heels, and it's time to change that in Washington.
First of all, yes, it was Carter. I watched the whole 7 hours. I taped.
I'm sorry. Oh no, yeah.
And it was John Boehner, and he was a home run. Specifically, we live in a time unlike any in history, where information is available just like that from all over the world, and we have a responsibility to do our due diligence on not just you two, but all of our candidates. And so I'm asking all candidates to pledge to make available all information about yourselves that exists in the public domain, including all blogs, YouTube videos, papers, thesis, educational records, all that information. Will you pledge to make that information available in every case?
Well, if it's in the public domain, it's already publicly available, and I think that's one of the greatest things about the internet, especially for those of us who grew up with it and the generation that has it hardwired, because we're all born skeptics and we all do our homework. And now, not just having the truth button right there, one click away, you know, so many of us have it right here in our pockets, and you can hear a politician trying to sell you a line and verify them on it right there. So I've done what I can for my military records, already posted a DD-214 on my website, and everything that I can has already been made available, and like as you said, in the public domain. And I encourage other people who want to look into that, who want to make sure that the internet is used to its full capacity to bring out the truth, that they do their homework on the candidates and they see what's out there.
My short answer is yes. I have a number of documents that I've written that are probably equivalent of a thesis, but they relate to environmental regulations, specifically here in New Mexico, and some of the oppressive things that are basically destroying business. Whether it relates to the pit rule testimony that I spent 17 days at trying to fight for some sanity here, or also several of the other environmental impact statements that impact New Mexico. I've got some documents. I know they're in the public record, but probably kind of hard to find, so I'd be happy to put the PDFs up on my website, and you can read some of my insanity, I guess, dealing with the federal government and the state government on regulation. But I don't have any thesis because I haven't written one. So.
Carrie.
Yes. I wonder if each of you would state your 3 favorite economists, starting with, and rank them, 1, 2, and 3. One your most favorite. With one of the 3 be living and 1 deceased. In other words, not all 3 living, not all 3 deceased. And 1 sentence on each one why they rank first, second, and third.
Boy, you're a hard to
That is a great question.
I thought we were first.
Okay, I'll give you my 3. They're all dead though. Hayek, Mises, and Milton Friedman. And I guess for the reason for the order, I haven't read all of Milton Friedman's material yet because he just has so much. So he could move up in the order. And of course, he just passed away here a couple years ago.
But all 3 are deceased.
Yes.
I'm going to let him slide.
Yeah, and so if I was going to say an economist right now who's alive, I'm going to extend that to Mr. Steve Pierce, who's running for the 2nd Congressional District and actually has an economics degree, would be my vote on that one at the moment. But in a nutshell, I mean, all these guys are giants with regard to the free market and the defense of our liberty. And when you look at Milton Friedman in particular, when the draft was being discussed, I mean, there's a gentleman right there who was front and center arguing for the removal of the draft. So, you know, their research extends across just the economic spectrum.
Well, I would say I got 2 out of 3 in common. Hayek, F.A. Hayek, as having the philosophical grounding and demonstrated the historical relevance of government intervention in the economy. I think his explanation of that in The Road to Serfdom is unparalleled. Second, Mises, because of the philosophical foundation that he brought to the free market and the way that he connected that with the broader philosophy of freedom, and still demonstrated in a very powerful way how the free market is the greatest route to prosperity. And then for the living economist, Tom Woods, who wrote Meltdown and has been traveling the country taking on all of the myths of the Obama administration, how we can somehow stimulate the economy or spend our way back into prosperity. But if I may, I'd like to add to my answer, one living, one dead, my 2 least favorite economists, Keynes and Krugman.
Carrie, all I can ask is that you somehow get yourself into a Ben Red Lujan event. You, sir, yes.
Well, following up on that, and following up on the previous question about entitlements, would either of you be willing to propose a privatization both of Medicare in some way and the Social Security mess? I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about current retirees or people who are going to retire soon, but people who are entering into it have to start out on a different understanding that no, this is not going to work 80 or 50 years from now. Be prepared to fund it yourself. If you put away the same amount that you're putting in Social Security into your own account that you own, isn't that the way to wean us off it? And we do willing to support that, even though it's highly controversial.
Well, I wholeheartedly support private savings account, medical savings accounts, and creating a space in federal law for those to be tax deductible or untaxed and sheltered from the abuses of the federal taxation system. But I really don't support taking what we have as failed federal programs and trying to create a private-public hybrid, because inevitably, and I think that's if that's not what you meant, but that I think is what most people talk about when they mean privatization, when they look at Social Security and Medicare. Like what Bush tried to do wasn't to turn the idea of saving for retirement over to the free market, but rather to have a government-controlled privatization, which is really more of a step sideways, and I think feeds into the greater problem that we have in the market today, which isn't that we have too much freedom, but that we have too much corporatism. Because in a true free market, in a real capitalist system, the only way to make money and be prosperous is to give people what they want. This is the genius of it, to serve people, to provide goods and services that people want to consume. And we have instead a system of corporatism where we have allowed financial institutions and banks and other major corporations to corrupt that system by taking advantage of the fact that now, through our corrupt federal government, it has become, in some ways, although less moral, more efficient to make money by winning favors through bribes and campaign contributions through the political process, rather than by serving people. And so what I would fear is that if we went to a system of a quasi-government privatization, that it would only feed into that, and we would see, as we have seen, the hands that have been, or the power that has been put in the hands of banks today and in financial institutions in Wall Street through government policy that creates bubbles and promotes speculation and creates gross moral hazard. Instead, we can have a return to a true free market solution to these issues. We can create private savings accounts that are sheltered from the federal taxation system, and that's what I would support.
And that's what I meant.
Okay.
And my short answer is yes. And if you're depending upon the government for anything, you got a problem. And so if the private sector is the solution, and it will be the solution, for everyone's health needs, because we're running out of money. And so if you're not planning ahead and planning to take care of your own health needs, or at least that little bug's gotten in your head just a tiny bit that maybe they're going to run out of money, and I might have to figure out how to take care of myself and my kids and my grandkids, you need to start thinking about that.
Other questions?
I have more.
I know you have more. You have plenty in this box. But before we do have some time, so I want to make sure that we have equal time here. And okay, I'll give you one more question, and if we end early, we end early. So, for Tom,
would both of you please share your views on eco-terrorism and extremist groups? Specifically, do you have any relation with them? Do you support Well, let's just leave it at that, but then also as a real quick follow-up, and I'm sorry to do this to you, but I wanted to clarify my earlier question about the public domain. Things like YouTube, blogs, those are part of the public domain, but they can be blocked so that people can't access them, and that's happening quite frequently in this election cycle, so that's the pledge I'm seeking.
Call for us now.
I'm not a member of any eco-terrorism organization. I'm a member of what's called Little Oil, which is little oil and gas, not big oil and gas, but the oil and gas companies that actually are based right here in New Mexico that drill and produce the majority of the oil and gas here in New Mexico, that employ people locally and that are not shipping their jobs overseas. But that's the short answer for that. But I do think that I'm upset with the eco-terrorists, and so sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And so I'm willing to go the extra mile with regard to some of these people that are trouncing our individual liberty in the name of their religion of saving the planet for some reason. And you've got to confront those folks, because we've been silent and we've let them march up and down and stomp all over us. So I'm going to say I'd like to be a member of the Patriot organization that confronts these groups. And I think that's being a member of the United States Congress, where I can have that vote and I don't waste 3 hours of my time sitting at the Environmental Improvement Board hearing, that I can go to Washington, D.C. and take that right there.
Anything on the YouTube public domain issue, or you?
You know, I do have a YouTube clip for New Mexico Turnaround Conference. I think it's about 45 minutes long if you'd like to watch me talk about oil and gas. I think Paul...
I think that's on our
and I
website,
think
so I'll
it's
plug
on
the
your
Rio Grande
website.
Foundation.org.
So if you'd like to see me talk about the energy issues for 45 minutes, and I have that. But I don't have a lot of clips, but we're going to put some more out there, and be happy to answer anything in the public domain.
Well, I have an extensive background as an activist, as you know, both speaking out against the unconstitutionality of our foreign policy and for veterans issues. And I had a blog and a YouTube channel that we're now using for the campaign. And one of the videos, just by way of example, that I posted that I think was very important for me in sharing the experience of veterans in Iraq was of a Marine telling a joke in a fighting hole during the siege of Fallujah that, well, just say Marines have a tendency to use some colorful language, and I think is inappropriate in the context of the political process. So I'm not going to put that out, because I really think it's inappropriate to bring into reasoned political discourse Marines telling dirty jokes. As for eco-terrorism, I think the real eco-terrorists are the people in Congress, people like Al Gore, who want to use the environment as a way to scare you into supporting more government control over your life and the economy.
Any last questions, final thoughts? Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah. This kind of goes along with your question. I'm an old fart that basically
Young man.
worked for, as a youth for Goldwater. And in light of the people that I've been around in my life, neither one of you really have the traditional type of qualifications for this job. So I have to make my choice based on your knowledge, based on your integrity, and I guess I'm trying to frame my question in such a way as not to anger anybody, but I have to say, Tom, that you angered me this afternoon.
Okay, let's just ask a question.
Okay, I'm getting to it, don't
I
I?
know. 3-minute time limit on YouTube.
Right. I felt somewhat affronted by your statement about Adam's qualifications. As a Vietnam veteran, I felt affronted by that somehow his only qualification is as a protester. And would you clarify for me that statement that you made on your blog? I wish I had had more time to sit and read it so that I wouldn't have to ask this question.
I'd be happy to. I'd encourage you to read the letter that comes prior to my comment, because there's, as in everything, there's a lot of devils in the details. But I stand behind my statements that I've said about Adam. I've made 2 statements. I've said he's an internet celebrity, and I said he's a war protester. Those are the 2 things that I've stated. And that's just fine. But you look at the qualifications for the United States Congress, and I think I have the resume and the background that people are going to vote for. They're going to vote for a small business guy. They're going to vote for a guy who has earned every single thing in his life. I haven't had anybody hand anything to me. I was collecting aluminum cans and put myself through school. I was green before green was cool. I've talked to a lot of veterans who are pissed off with some of the things that Adam has stated. My dad is a veteran, okay? He served for 22 years, 3 terms in Vietnam, and a tour in Korea. And he's upset about some of those things, okay? So I'm entitled to my opinion. Everything that I've said is accurate and correct. And so I'd encourage you to check those things out. But I think that I have the experience, I have the tenor, and I have the good judgment that you're going to want as your next congressman. You don't have to vote for me, but I think the majority of the people are going to vote for me. That's fine.
Yes. I'd like to just respond to that because just to clarify the statement, and I was similarly bothered by it, that there was nothing else in my resume that even qualified as a line. And I think that service in the military, I think service in combat is worthy of a line on one's resume. And I think that is one thing that qualifies me to be a representative. And I think it is one thing that is universally respected. And I would hope that whoever wins this race shows that kind of respect for veterans.
Yes.
Do you, sir, have a question? I thought I saw your hand up. Let's get to the gentleman. Do you have a question? Back?
Yeah. Question for Tom. Do you think you can get young people to come out and vote for you in primary and general election?
The short answer is yes. If you look at some of the polling data that came out here recently, which I have to say is favorable for both of the candidates that are sitting here at this table, that if you look at the 18 to 29 sector vote, I'm carrying 51% of that vote compared to Ben Ray Lujan. And so if you compare that with Adam's numbers, I think I'm actually carrying a higher percentage. Got a lot of folks in Farmington walking doors, a young group working for me. Now, have I been to every community college to talk to them? No, not yet, but I plan on it. And so I plan on folks that are going to be paying the bill, which is the youth. I mean, they're going to be getting the bill or the shaft, however you want to say it, with regard to what we're doing in this country. And they're going to turn out to vote. We've been registering a lot of young voters. Yeah.
I want to stress that the question should be asked with both candidates in mind, and we're kind of deviating from that, but I will take, you said you had one more question. So
I
let's
really
go
just
with
have a comment. I feel very frustrated because I think you're both great. And I don't know how to decide, but that's all I want to say.
Well, good thing is you have a few months to decide. It'll be a lot warmer then. Okay, well, thank you both candidates for your time and your encouragement. And I want to remind you all about the, information on both tables and out front. The Liberty on the Rocks Santa Fe edition, sponsored by the Rio Grande Foundation. And also in Albuquerque, I hate to...
Are we doing closing remarks?
Yeah, sorry, my bad. Yeah, we'll get you closing remarks. Sorry, don't leave yet, just yet. And also the Rio Grande Foundation is having Samuel Wurzelbacher, aka Joe the Plumber, on March 18th at an event in Albuquerque. So if you might want to check that out, that'd be great. So we went in alphabetical order on the opening remarks. We're only going to give you 3 minutes on the closing remarks. It's kind of, I think people have seen you and see where you stand. But Tom, why don't you come up and give the closing, 3 minutes of closing.
I'm so used to sitting down here, atrophying in my legs here. Thank you. Well, thank you guys for coming out. This is where you get to decide who's the best candidate to represent you in Washington, D.C., and I hope I'm that candidate. Been working hard. I'm going to continue to work hard to earn every single vote, including the folks that may not agree with me all the time, and I'm going to go out and work hard. The one thing I'm going to promise to do is to plan on protecting your individual rights in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to be granting you any monetary stipends or any subsistence privileges, but I've been blessed in my own life through hard work and perseverance to be able to stand before you guys here today and to ask you for your vote to be your next congressman. I am not beholden to any entitled power broker, be that within New Mexico or across this land of the United States of America. My grassroots support is based right here in New Mexico. And the grass really is greener on this side of the fence. I'm a Christian, I'm a conservative, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-gun, and I'm one of those crazy Tea Party patriots who's going to defend the Constitution of the United States of America every single day and with every single vote in Washington. I'm going to stop the out-of-control spending that we've got going on there, and I'm going to bring common sense to Washington, D.C. So I thank you guys again for your time. I ask you for your vote. I ask you for your financial support. They say cash is blood, and blood is life. And so if you cut off the cash flow, then you're dead. I don't want to be dead. I don't think anybody else does out there. So I'd appreciate your financial contribution. Paul, thank you, and the Rio Grande Foundation. If you got any extra money in your pocket, please contribute to this fine organization. They are doing great work here in New Mexico as the free market think tank and the guys right on the front lines. So thanks again, and thanks for coming out on this Al Gore event day.
Thank you all very much for being here. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to tell a story from my time in Iraq. During the siege of Fallujah, a young Lance Corporal was shot through the side of his flak jacket in a firefight, and the bullet hit an artery near his spine. My team was called to help get him to the field hospital at Camp Takatim. He was on a stretcher in the Humvee in front of me, and I watched the corpsman treating the external wound in a frightened, hurried panic as the dust from the hot road swirled around us. And when we got there, I carried him in on a stretcher, and he flailed his arm off to the side, and as I put it back on, I told him, "Don't worry, you made it. You're going to be okay." But he died only minutes later from the internal bleeding. I have to live with that memory every day, but I have learned from it. The problems facing this country today are not superficial. The Band-Aid promises from politicians are not going to save us, and I will not stand here and tell you that everything is just going to be okay if we keep sending the same types of people to Washington. I have great hope for America, but it comes not from any politician or any election or even any of my plans for what I'm going to do if I have the honor of being your representative. My hope comes from the Tea Party patriots in Santa Fe and in Farmington, many of whom are taking to the streets for the first time in their lives. My hope comes from the reservation where Navajos are reorganizing their own government to better serve the needs of their people. My hope comes from all the high school students who have already joined this campaign, who know that a better future is ready for America because Americans, we are ready to fight for it. My hope comes from all of you who are here tonight because you are getting involved and engaged in the political process, and I hear people all over the district having conversations about the nature and role of government like I have never heard in my lifetime. Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Ben Ray Lujan are leading this country down the wrong track, but I am hopeful because people like you are coming together to stand up to them. If you want to be a part of this endeavor, please come talk to me or one of the members of my team after this event, or go to our website, kokeshforcongress.com, and get signed up. I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and I ask for your prayers, because I am running for Congress to represent the people of New Mexico's 3rd District for the same reason that I joined the Marine Corps, for the same reason that I volunteered to go to Iraq, for the same reason that I've stood up for America's veterans since coming home, because I believe that it is my patriotic duty. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for coming out, and have a safe trip home.